The thing about family gatherings is that everyone has their assigned role. I'd learned mine early, the dreamer who never quite made it. The one who was always trying something, always working on a project, always just shy of actual success. My sister Vanessa had a different role. She was the golden child, the successful one, the daughter who made our parents proud. At 32, she was a regional sales director at a pharmaceutical company, pulling in $165,000 a year plus bonuses. She drove a leased BMW, lived in a nice condo downtown, and never missed an opportunity to remind everyone, especially me, about her achievements. I was 29 and according to family lore I did something with computers. That's how Mom explained it to her friends. Dad told his golf buddies I was still figuring things out. Vanessa told anyone who'd listen that I ran a little online business from my apartment. None of them were technically wrong. I did work from my apartment. I did run an online business. The part they missed was that my little online business was a cybersecurity firm with 847 employees across 9 countries, contracts with 34 Fortune 500 companies, and annual revenue that had just crossed $3.2 billion. But who was counting? Pass the stuffing, Marcus, Vanessa said to her husband, a cardiologist who never let anyone forget his title. She glanced at me with that particular smile she'd perfected over the years, the one that was technically pleasant but actually condescending. So, how's the website stuff going? It's going well, I said, accepting the mashed potatoes from my cousin Amy. Still working from home? Mom asked, her tone carefully neutral. She'd given up trying to understand what I did around the time I turned 25 and kept insisting I had business meetings that she couldn't quite picture. Most of the time. I travel occasionally. Travel where? Dad asked, cutting his turkey with precise movements. For what? Client meetings. Industry conferences. Team check-ins at our international offices. Vanessa laughed, that bright musical sound that set my teeth on edge. International offices. Listen to him. Marcus, doesn't that sound adorable? Like he's playing SimCity or something. Marcus chuckled dutifully. We all have to start somewhere. I've been running the company for 7 years, I said mildly. Not sure I'd call it starting. 7 years, Vanessa repeated, exchanging a look with our mother. And still working from your apartment. Maybe it's time to think about stability, little brother. Real career growth. Benefits. Retirement planning. Adult stuff. I have all of those things. Do you really, though? She leaned forward, her expression shifting into what she probably thought was sisterly concern. I'm worried about you. We all are. You're almost 30, living alone, working on this computer thing that none of us understand. When was the last time you had a real job? With a real company. Define real, I said. A company that people have heard of. A company with an office building. A company that does something tangible, not just internet stuff. I took a sip of water. The irony was delicious. Vanessa's pharmaceutical company had hired my firm 2 years ago to overhaul their entire cybersecurity infrastructure after a data breach exposed patient information. She'd been in the meetings where they discussed the contract. She just hadn't connected that contract to me because the company name, SecureNet Global, didn't sound like something her little brother would own. I like what I do, I said simply. That's wonderful, honey, Mom said, trying to smooth things over the way she always did. We just want to see you settled. Maybe with a girlfriend? Someone to share your life with. I've been seeing someone for 3 months. Her name is Dr. Sarah Chin. She's a computer science professor at Stanford. A professor? Dad perked up slightly. At least that was a title he recognized. That's impressive. She's brilliant, I agreed. Her research on quantum encryption is groundbreaking. Vanessa's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it and frowned. It's Richard. Your boss is calling you on Thanksgiving? Marcus asked. He probably just wants to wish me happy holidays, she said, but she stood up anyway, already moving toward the kitchen. Give me a minute. The table settled into comfortable conversation. Uncle Pete asked Dad about his golf game. Aunt Caroline discussed her plans for Christmas. Cousin Amy showed everyone pictures from her recent vacation to Hawaii. I ate my turkey and thought about the IPO. Going public had been my CFO's idea. We don't need the capital, Janet had said, reviewing the quarterly reports in my apartment. Sorry, my home office that also served as command center for a multi-billion-dollar operation. But an IPO would give us leverage for acquisitions, stock options for employees, and market validation that would make client acquisition easier. She'd been right, of course. Janet was always right about the financial stuff. That's why I paid her $680,000 a year and gave her enough stock options to retire wealthy. The IPO had launched this morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. Opening price: $47 per share. Within 3 hours, it had climbed to $63. Current market valuation: $12.4 billion. Fortune magazine had been tracking the story for months. They'd interviewed me, photographed me, researched the company's history. The cover story was supposed to publish next week, but they'd moved it up to coincide with the IPO announcement. The issue had hit newsstands at 2 p.m. It was now 2:47 p.m. Vanessa's voice drifted from the kitchen, muffled but rising in pitch. "What do you mean it's Marcus's brother? I don't understand." Marcus looked up from his plate, frowning. "Did she say my name?" "I think she said someone's brother," Aunt Caroline offered helpfully. "Marcus." Vanessa's voice was shrill now. She appeared in the doorway, phone clutched in her hand, face pale. "Marcus, what's your brother's name?" "Your half-brother, the one who lives in Seattle." "Daniel." "Why?" "Not Daniel. The other one. The younger one." "I don't have another brother," Marcus said, confused. Vanessa's eyes found mine across the table. Her mouth opened and closed silently. Finally, she managed, "Richard wants to know if I'm related to you." "That's a strange question," I said. "We're siblings." "He's met me." "No, I mean." She looked down at her phone like it had betrayed her. "He wants to know if I'm related to the you who just took SecureNet Global public this morning." The table went very quiet. "The you who's on the cover of Fortune magazine," she continued, her voice getting smaller with each word. "The you who's profiled as one of the most influential cybersecurity experts in the world. The you whose company is now valued at $12 billion. $12.4 billion last I checked," I said. "But the market's volatile on IPO day. Could be higher now." Uncle Pete dropped his fork. It clattered against his plate with a sound that seemed very loud in the sudden silence. "You own SecureNet?" Vanessa whispered. "Founded it, built it, took it public this morning." "Yes." Mom's hand went to her chest. "Jake, what are you talking about?" "SecureNet Global. The cybersecurity firm. We protect data infrastructure for major corporations, government agencies, and financial institutions worldwide. Current client list includes 34 Fortune 500 companies, 12 governments, and about 200 mid-size enterprises. We went public this morning at 9:30 a.m. The stock opened at $47 and is currently trading around $63. Dad's face had gone red. "That's not possible." "It's very possible. It happened about 4 hours ago. The NASDAQ opening bell was live-streamed if you want to watch the replay. I'm the one who rang it." "You." Vanessa's phone was still in her hand, ringing again now. She ignored it. "You rang the NASDAQ bell?" Traditional for IPOs. Surprisingly heavy, actually. They give you a little hammer and there's a whole ceremony. Sarah came with me. We had breakfast afterward at this place near Times Square that makes excellent eggs Benedict. "Sarah," Mom repeated faintly. "Your girlfriend who's a Stanford professor." "Dr. Chen, yes. She's been very supportive during the IPO process. Though she thinks I should have waited another year to maximize valuation. She might be right, but Janet, that's my CFO, made a compelling argument about market timing." Marcus had his phone out now, typing rapidly. His face went slack. "Holy shit." "Language," Aunt Caroline said automatically. "No, seriously, holy shit." He turned his phone around. On the screen was the Fortune magazine cover. My face, professional and serious in a charcoal suit I'd bought specifically for the photo shoot, against a dark blue background. The headline read, "The Invisible Billionaire, How Jake Morrison Built a $12 billion Cybersecurity Empire in Complete Silence." "Invisible Billionaire," Dad read aloud. "Jake, is this real?" "The magazine is real. The article is real. The IPO is real. The company is real. Which part are you questioning?" Vanessa was scrolling frantically now, her face cycling through expressions I'd never seen before. "You were on CNBC this morning. Bloomberg interviewed you. The Wall Street Journal has a feature article. Forbes has a video interview. She looked up, something close to panic in her eyes. Richard wants to know if you'd be willing to speak at our company's annual security summit. I'm usually booked for speaking engagements about 8 months in advance, I said. But have him email my assistant. Contact information is in the Fortune article. Your assistant, she repeated numbly. I have 4 actually. Executive assistant, technical assistant, communications coordinator, and someone who handles travel logistics. Plus the full executive team, CFO, COO, CTO, VP of Sales, VP of Operations, General Counsel. About 850 employees total now, though we're hiring aggressively. The IPO capital will fund expansion into Asian markets. Uncle Pete made a strangled sound. 850 employees? Well, 847 as of this morning. But we have about a dozen positions opening next week, and the Asian expansion will add another 100 by Q2. Cousin Amy was reading from her own phone now. It says here you started the company in your apartment with $15,000 in savings. $12,000 actually. Fortune rounded up. I spent most of it on server equipment and incorporation fees. The first year was lean. Lean, Vanessa echoed. Her phone rang again. She answered it this time, her voice mechanical. Hello, Richard. Yes, that's my brother. I didn't know. No, he never mentioned. She wandered back toward the kitchen, still talking. Mom was crying. Actual tears running down her face. Jake, sweetheart, why didn't you tell us? I tried to, Mom. Remember when I said I'd signed a major corporate client and you asked if it was a small business that needed website help? Remember when I mentioned hiring employees and Dad asked if I meant freelancers on Fiverr? Remember when I said I was meeting with investors and you told me to be careful of scams? The silence that followed was profound. You thought I was running a hobby business, I continued gently. A side hustle. Something to keep me busy while I figured out what I really wanted to do with my life. And after a while I stopped trying to explain. Marcus was still scrolling. You graduated from community college. I did. Couldn't afford university. Taught myself programming through online courses and textbooks. Built my first security protocol when I was 21, sold it to a defense contractor for $2.3 million. Used that capital to start SecureNet. $2.3 million when you were 21, Dad repeated, looking dazed. It was a good protocol. The contractor still uses it. I check in occasionally to make sure it's holding up against new threats. Aunt Caroline had tears in her eyes too. Jake, I told everyone at my book club that you were a nice boy who did computer repair. I do repair computers sometimes. Sarah's laptop crashed last month and I fixed it. Loose memory card. That's not what I mean. I know what you mean. Vanessa returned from the kitchen. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in 5 minutes. She sat down heavily, setting her phone carefully on the table like it might explode. Richard wants you to keynote our security summit, she said quietly. He's offering $50,000 plus travel expenses. That's below my usual rate, but I'll consider it. Have him send the details to my assistant. Your usual rate, she repeated. What's your usual rate? $150,000 for keynotes, $200,000 for full-day workshops. Though I mostly do those for charitable causes now. The fees go to a scholarship fund I established for community college students studying cybersecurity. A scholarship fund, Mom whispered. The Morrison Cybersecurity Scholarship. Full tuition, plus a stipend for living expenses and a guaranteed internship at SecureNet upon graduation. We've funded 37 students so far. Dad's phone started ringing. He looked at it, then at me, then back at it. It's Jim Crawford. From the club. Senior partner at Crawford Digital Solutions, I said. We're their primary security vendor. Contract value is about $4.3 million annually. You know Jim. We have lunch monthly. Nice guy. Terrible at golf, but he won't admit it. Dad answered the phone with shaking hands. Jim. Yes, that's my son. I had no idea. Yes, I'll ask him. Uncle Pete was reading the Fortune article now, his fingers scrolling down his phone screen. It says here you were named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people last year. That was unexpected. The ceremony was nice though. Met some interesting people. You met the Time 100 and didn't mention it? Aunt Caroline's voice climbed an octave. You didn't ask. Also, you were busy planning Amy's wedding. It didn't seem relevant. Amy made a small sound. My wedding was the same week as the time 100? Week after. I flew back early to make it. Gave a toast, remember? You said it was sweet. I thought you flew back from a computer conference. The time 100 ceremony is technically a conference. Very prestigious one, granted, but still people talking about work. Vanessa's phone rang again. And again. She ignored it, staring at me instead. Why? Why what? Why didn't you tell us? Really tell us? Not just mention it, but sit us down and explain that you'd built something massive. I set down my fork and looked at her. Really looked at her. Because you wouldn't have believed me. And even if you had, it wouldn't have changed how you saw me. That's not true. Isn't it? Vanessa, do you remember my 25th birthday? She blinked. What? My 25th birthday. I just closed a $40 million Series B funding round. It was one of the biggest cybersecurity investments that year. I was on top of the world. I came to Sunday dinner and you introduced me to your friends as my brother who does tech support. When I tried to explain about the funding round, you laughed and said I was exaggerating. You said I needed to stop dreaming and get realistic about my career prospects. Her face flushed. I don't remember that. I do. Because it was the moment I realized that no amount of success would change your perception of me. You'd decided who I was. The dreamer, the one who played at business, and nothing I said would change that. So I stopped trying. Jake, Mom started, but I held up a hand gently. I'm not angry. I'm really not. But you all need to understand something. This morning when I rang the NASDAQ bell, I wasn't thinking about proving you wrong. I wasn't thinking about validation or recognition or any of that. I was thinking about the 847 people who work for SecureNet. The clients who trust us with their data. The students we're funding through scholarships. The protocols we've developed that are keeping hospitals and banks and government systems safe from cyber attacks. The table was silent. The IPO wasn't about the money, I continued. My personal net worth is somewhere around $8.3 billion now, depending on how the stock closes today. But that number is just a number. What matters is that we built something that actually makes the world safer. That's what I care about. That's what I've always cared about. Dad had finished his call with Jim Crawford. He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between awe and regret. Jim wants to know if you'd be willing to speak at his company's board meeting next month. I'll check my calendar. Have him email my assistant. You keep saying that, Vanessa said. Your assistant. Like it's not real. Like you're playing pretend. Her name is Jennifer Park. She's 26, graduated top of her class from Berkeley, and she's frighteningly efficient. She'll respond to meeting requests within 4 hours and handle all the scheduling. I pay her $95,000 a year plus stock options that will probably make her a millionaire by the time she's 30. Marcus was still reading articles on his phone. It says here you turned down acquisition offers from Microsoft and Google. Multiple times. Microsoft's highest offer was $8.6 billion 3 years ago. Google went up to $9.2 billion last year. Neither made strategic sense. We're building something specific, and being absorbed into a tech giant would have compromised that vision. You turned down $9 billion, Uncle Pete said, his voice faint. I turned down $9 billion that would have made me wealthy but would have destroyed the company's independence. Today we went public and kept control of our direction. Market valuation is $12.4 billion and climbing. We made the right choice. Vanessa's face had gone through pale and landed on something close to green. The security breach. 2 years ago. When our company's patient data was exposed. I remember. It was all over the news. We hired SecureNet to fix it. Richard made the final decision, but I was in the meetings. I reviewed the contract. Her voice got very small. I signed off on the expense report. $2.7 million for the emergency overhaul. $2.9 million, I corrected. There were additional charges for ongoing monitoring and staff training. You fixed our company's security breach. My team fixed it. I consulted on the architecture, but we have specialists who handle implementation. That's what you pay for, expertise at every level. I told you it was too expensive, she whispered. I told Richard we should find a cheaper option. You did. I read the meeting notes. Richard overruled you because cheaper options had failed. You needed the best and SecureNet is the best. That's not arrogance, that's just measurable fact. Our client retention rate is 97%. Our breach prevention rate is 99.2%. Those numbers speak for themselves. Mom was crying harder now. Jake, I'm so sorry. We didn't know. We should have listened. You should have believed me, I said gently. There's a difference. Listening is passive. Believing requires trust. Dad's phone rang again. Then Uncle Pete's. Then Amy's. The Fortune article was spreading apparently, and everyone who knew our family was making connections. Vanessa stood up abruptly. I need air. She walked out to the backyard. Through the window I could see her pacing, phone pressed to her ear, probably talking to Richard again. Marcus cleared his throat. For what it's worth, I think what you've built is remarkable. Thank you. And I think my wife has been uncharitable in how she's talked about you. She's been who she is, I said. I don't hold it against her. Success makes people uncomfortable when they can't understand it. She understood her own success. Work hard, climb the corporate ladder, earn a good salary. She couldn't understand mine because it didn't fit that pattern. Still, he said. She should have been kinder. Probably. But kindness isn't something you can force. Either people choose it or they don't. My phone buzzed. A text from Janet. Stock closed at $67. Total valuation $13.1 billion. Champagne tomorrow. I texted back. Coffee is fine. See you at the office. Because that was the thing. Tomorrow morning I'd wake up at 6 a.m. like always. I'd make coffee in my apartment. My home office, my command center, my space that my family couldn't quite take seriously. I'd review overnight security reports from our international offices. I'd check in with the Tokyo team about their new client onboarding. I'd have a video call with the London office about the expansion plans. And then I'd go to our headquarters, a sleek building downtown that none of my family had ever visited, and I'd spend 10 hours working on the next challenge, the next protocol, the next problem that needed solving. Because that's what I did. That's who I was. Not the invisible billionaire from the Fortune cover. Not the family disappointment who finally proved himself. Just a guy who'd found a problem worth solving and had built something to solve it. Vanessa came back inside. Her eyes were red. She sat down without looking at anyone. Richard says the article is everywhere, she said quietly. Every major news outlet is covering the IPO story. They're calling you the most successful cybersecurity entrepreneur of your generation. That's generous. There are several people in the field doing equally important work. Richard wants to know. He paused, swallowed. He wants to know if I'd be willing to facilitate an introduction. A formal meeting between you and our C-suite. You mean he wants you to use your family connection to get access to me? She flinched. Yes. And how does that make you feel? Like I've been an idiot, she whispered. Like I spent years mocking you for building the exact thing my company now needs desperately. Not just your company, Marcus added, looking at his own phone. My hospital just sent an email to all staff. Apparently we're in talks with SecureNet about upgrading our patient data security. The medical board wants to meet with the visionary behind SecureNet's healthcare protocols. That would be Dr. Amanda Liu, I said. She heads our healthcare division. Former ER physician who got frustrated with hospital data vulnerabilities and switched careers. He's brilliant. Happy to facilitate an introduction if your board wants to meet her. They want to meet you. I'm not the healthcare expert. Amanda is. That's the point of building a strong team. You hire people who are better than you in their specific domains. Uncle Pete was still reading articles. It says you personally developed the encryption protocol that's now the industry standard for financial institutions. The Morrison protocol, yes. Though calling it industry standard is a bit premature. About 60% of major financial institutions use it or a variant. There's still room for improvement. 60%, he repeated. Of the entire financial industry. Of major institutions. Smaller banks and credit unions often can't afford implementation costs, which is why we're developing a scaled-down version that's more accessible. Should launch next quarter. You're making it cheaper so more people can use it? Amy asked. That's the point. Security shouldn't be a luxury good. Everyone deserves protection from cyber threats, not just organizations that can afford premium services. Mom had stopped crying and was just staring at me now like she was seeing me for the first time. When did you become this person? I've always been this person, Mom. You just couldn't see it because you were looking for something else. You wanted me to be like Vanessa, climbing a corporate ladder, earning a salary, fitting into a box you could understand. But I was never going to be that. I was always going to be the person who built something from nothing, who solved problems that other people couldn't see, who did things differently because the traditional path didn't make sense. We should have supported you, Dad said, his voice rough. You should have believed in me, I corrected. Support is nice, but belief is essential. You didn't believe I could build something meaningful because you couldn't imagine what that would look like outside of traditional success markers. Vanessa was crying silently now. I called it your little online business. You did. I told my friends you were playing at being an entrepreneur. You did. I introduced you to my colleagues as a tech support guy. Yes. Jake, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked at her for a long moment. I know you are. And I accept your apology. But Vanessa, you need to understand something. The apology doesn't erase the years of dismissal. It doesn't undo the times you made me feel small or the opportunities you had to support me and chose not to. What it does is acknowledge that you were wrong. That's important. That's a start. But it's just a start. What do I do now? She asked, her voice breaking. You move forward. You treat people, all people, not just successful ones, with respect and kindness. You question your assumptions. You listen when people tell you about their dreams instead of dismissing them. You become someone who builds others up instead of tearing them down. And us? Mom asked. What about us? I still love you, I said simply. All of you. That hasn't changed. But our relationships need to change. I need you to see me as I actually am, not as you want me to be or as you assumed I was. I need you to engage with my actual life, not the simplified version that fits your expectations. We want that, Dad said. We want to know you. Really know you. Then start by reading the Fortune article. Really reading it, not just looking at the headline and the valuation. Read about why I built this company. Read about the problems we're solving. Read about the philosophy behind our approach. Read about the team I've assembled and the culture we've created. Read about who I actually am, not who you thought I was. My phone buzzed again. Sarah, dinner at 7? I want to hear how Thanksgiving went. I smiled and texted back. It's been interesting. See you at 7. I'm bringing pie. You're leaving? Mom asked, seeing me check my phone. I have dinner plans with Sarah. We're celebrating the IPO properly. Quiet dinner, just the two of us. You rang the NASDAQ bell this morning and you're celebrating with a quiet dinner? Aunt Caroline sounded scandalized. I don't need a big party. I need good food and good company. Sarah provides both. Can we meet her? Mom asked. Properly, I mean. Not just in passing. If she wants to meet you, yes. But I'm not going to pressure her. She knows how you've treated me and she's protective. You'll have to earn her trust too. That landed heavily. The idea that they had to earn trust, that it wasn't automatically given, seemed to shift something in the room. I stood up, grabbed my jacket. Thank you for dinner. The turkey was excellent as always. Jake, Vanessa said. Can I call you? Actually call you, not just text. You've always been able to call me. You chose not to. I'll do better. I promise I'll do better. I hope you do, I said. And I meant it. I walked out to my car. A Tesla Model S that I'd bought 2 years ago because the technology impressed me, not because of the status symbol. My family had assumed it was leased, probably stretched my budget. They'd never asked. The drive back to the city took 40 minutes. I spent it on a hands-free call with Janet, reviewing the IPO numbers, discussing tomorrow's interviews, planning the next quarter's strategy. The Fortune article is performing incredibly well, she said. Over 5 million views already. The PR team says we should expect a significant uptick in client inquiries. Make sure we have capacity to handle them. I don't want response times to slip because we're overwhelmed. Already on it. I've authorized overtime for the sales team and put out a call for temp support staff. Good. What's the stock doing after hours? Holding steady at $67. Could climb higher tomorrow depending on market response. Let it climb. We've built something solid. The market's just catching up to what we've known for years. That we're the best in the business? That we solve real problems with real solutions. The rest is just numbers. I could hear her smile through the phone. Sometimes I forget you don't actually care about being a billionaire. I care about building great security systems. The billionaire thing is just a side effect. A $8.3 billion side effect. Still just a side effect. We finished the call as I pulled up to my building. The loft was quiet, exactly how I'd left it this morning. Banks of monitors on one wall, comfortable furniture, plants that Sarah insisted would improve the energy, bookshelves full of technical manuals and cybersecurity journals. This was my space. My real space. Where I'd built everything from nothing. Where I'd written the first lines of code that became the Morrison protocol. Where I'd stayed up for 72 hours straight fixing a critical vulnerability for a major bank. Where I'd celebrated every milestone, every breakthrough, every success. My family had never seen it. They'd never asked to see it. Maybe someday they would. Maybe someday they'd understand that this apartment wasn't just a place I lived. It was the foundation of everything I'd built. The command center of a billion-dollar empire. The quiet space where I did my best thinking. Or maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they'd stay focused on the headlines and the valuations and miss the actual story. Either way, I had work to do. And dinner with Sarah at 7. I smiled, pulled out my laptop and got back to work. Because that's who I was. That's who I'd always been. And now, finally, the world was starting to notice.